to action and confidence in uncertain times. I'm Mark Wolfe, and we're here today to kind of just bring you through something we think is real exciting, people. And we're going to go through it in a way where you're going to get to interact in a way with us. It feels like you're in the room. We're so confident you're going to like this. We even have our next session planned. It'll be July 23rd. Trust is the new ROI, winning buy-in when everyone's guard is up. So I'm Mark Wolfe. I'm an executive coach, advisor, and author of Yeah But. And I help leaders cut through the noise to live, learn, and lead better. I'll let the rest of the gentlemen introduce themselves. Wally, tell us a little about who you are.
Hey, Mark, thanks, and thanks, Dave, for joining us. For those on the video, first of all, please jump into the message. We want to see your questions as we go along because this is interactive. This is fun to do. We are all three people leaders. I'm an auto person by trade, but I'm a people person first, and I like to lead, knowing the people that work for me, with me, and around me, and developing them. And so nothing more fun than that. So let me turn it over to Dave. He's going to help us walk through this session. Some really good tools, some tools to hand out at the end. So with that, Dave, what's up?
Dave O'Brien here. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Wally. I'm the bald guy who needs a hat to keep himself balanced. Personal valet to this team. Soon to be author of the book Run Toward the Fire. And just people strategy helper to clients from automotive to medical to technology for the last couple of decades of my life. So today I am excited because we've been talking, we've been goofing around a little too, but we've been talking about this idea that says, okay, with everything that's going on with the world today, what does it mean to really guide our teams to taking action and having confidence during things that are uncertain? Now, I don't think any of the three of us imagined that there would be as much tension in the Middle East as there is when we wrote the title Uncertain Times, right? But here we are, and here we are talking about teams and how we enable them to be effective. We picked three things for us to share, right, guys? And what we want to share today are just three simple things that talk about what does it mean to design their work so that it has clarity and courage, but not control, right? And we'll talk about that and how do we help them with clarity and courage. We'll talk a little bit about this acronym called VUCA, right? How do we lead through VUCA? We'll tell you a little bit about the origin of the word VUCA from the Army War College, which is all about helping people with volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity so that they don't burn out and end up constantly stuck in indecision. And lastly, we'll tell you a little bit about this idea that says, okay, if those things work, what does it mean to build accountability around some of that stuff without accountability being this thing that crushes morale, right? Being something that we can embrace. And we're going to be excited to share the wisdom from Wally, Mark, myself. Well, at least we're going to call it wisdom until you put something in the chat that says it's not, right? Because we've really worked hard to prepare to do this. So guys, let's start out. We talked about this idea in the beginning that says helping people through uncertainty gets a whole lot better with clarity. We talked a little bit about clarity and the importance of it last time we were together. We talked about how to help them with courage without the control micromanagement stuff, right? And one of the things in my book that I shared with you guys that we'll share with the audience today really is the ability to help people break through hesitation habits. Because when there isn't clarity, when they lack the courage from an organizational culture perspective, the hesitation habits of overthink, avoid, defer, or do nothing unless I'm positive of perfection really cause leaders and teams to struggle. What do you guys see? What do you hear around those hesitations and difficulties?
Yeah, let me jump in first, and then Mark certainly jump in. And as you touch on all of those different kind of descriptors, if you will, Dave, and I'm with you completely. It is very easy in the culture pressure that we all live in, and there's certainly the controllables and the non-controllables. But as a leader, and talking about people first, trying to give them the grace, the space, the intent from the standpoint of like I really want them to be intentional about what they're thinking about doing, what they're working on, whether it's a project or whatnot, giving them the space to do that is important. And the clarity piece of this helps them do that and how leadership responds. So you want to develop people, you want to let them stretch. And stretching sometimes is painful, and it's a little bit of a fail forward. So you get better and you grow, right, through some chaos, and we get better. So I think as leaders, one of the things I see and notice, especially with the intensity growing, not only just individually but in the companies, certainly in automotive, it's the ones that are breaking through are allowing that creativity, that stretch, the push, the drive for their teams, and they're surfacing to the top. They're leading the pack because they allow that to happen. Mark?
Your point there, those two words that I hope Mark will dovetail on there, though, Wally, is space and grace, right?
Yeah.
Room to figure out the clarity and do some trial and error, and the grace that truly says it's okay if the experiment didn't work. Let's just learn. Mark, what do you think?
I think we have to start with questions, right? I think when we're really trying to communicate with people, I don't care what you're trying to do as a leader. Are you sure that people understand? If you don't start foundationally with that, all the rest is just noise, right? I want to lead better. I want to have better teams. What is clarity? Do we even know when you talk to a leader how clear they think they're saying something and how clear someone's receiving it, and
Oh,
how that disconnect through text, email, verbal, if you don't get that right, everything else falls apart, but we skip that part so many times. So I'm stuck there and want to work on that first before we do anything else.
I
no,
think that's
you're on target. Go, Wally.
Well, yeah, I'm just gonna jump in and say one thing. It reminds me because we joked around the other day about putting our phones down to be focused on something, but it's almost back. And again, I'm the oldest person, at least on the screen, by a long shot. And I remember the days of what happens at the water cooler, right? What happens at the water cooler is that lack of maybe understanding of what the leader's trying to do, or the lack of understanding, of what's being asked of the team, or just confusion over how do we move forward, or focusing on things that are not material to what you're trying to do. And so that, from a leader perspective, trying to understand, am I speaking? And I agree with you, Mark, asking questions, provoking discussion so that you align the thought process, again, grace, space as well, but you align with the team member or the team members in a way that they feel like they can explore, they can investigate, they can strive, they can stretch.
And you know what? I want to make sure we circle back to Dave on this, but one thing I want to bring up, I was just listening to a podcast with Craig Groeschel, and he was talking about people that ask questions, like an after action review, since we're going to use a military term here with VUCA. And you think about it, it's like the first question you ask, like, how did this go? What do you expect, et cetera. But it's until you get to the deeper questions, the third, the fourth, the fifth, sixth question. And then that's when you really find out somebody's like, yeah, it wasn't just a presentation that was bad. It wasn't the audience. It wasn't what was going on. I didn't like the concept at all, but you never asked me. Mm-hmm. Oh, right. So I think to be a great leader, we have to be able to be resilient enough to listen to people and hear things we don't like to hear. And we were talking before we started about saying things to people that they sometimes don't like to hear. That's why I want this LinkedIn Live to be like not something that people already hear, but to hear the tough truths that I know Dave can bring in a way that he's caring enough, and we each can, but it's not just doing the same thing. You must do things differently and listen differently if you want a different outcome. Dave, take it away.
Yeah, well, you're circled back to that fun thing we were talking about, which in a sense isn't really funny, right? It's serious, and it was the concept of artificial harmony, right? And how many organizations have a culture that lives and breathes artificial harmony versus clarity, candor, and courage, right? And
Mm.
clarity, candor, and courage get easier in organizations that encourage the questions that are hard to ask, because it breaks through artificial harmony and says, okay, even though Mark and Wally are my boss, I should ask them why the emperor has no clothes on in this idea or this presentation, because I care enough about the outcome of the presentation to say, I think we're headed down the wrong path. But an organization, as well as a leader, has to develop the willingness to have that kind of courage to say, it's okay in our organization to run toward the fire. It's okay to ask the important questions that allow us to avoid the problem that could come up, right? And it really leads to that next point we were going to talk about, which is VUCA, which is a lot of what causes organizations and individual leaders to struggle with the idea. So VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And leaders in today's environment, whether it's ChatGPT, we were talking about Google Gemini a little bit ago, we could talk about Perplexity, we could talk about just regular internet searches. Leaders and organizations are inundated with so much information. You have people who are translating that to, okay, well, everything feels really volatile. Wait, there's a whole bunch of uncertainty. Who do I believe? What do I believe? There's complexity in, well, this is how the organization works or it won't work. And in those environments, we have people that are burning out from the inability to say, how do I ask the questions? How do I gain the clarity? How am I able to make those decisions? And I suggest, to hitchhike on what you said, both of you, we have to create a culture around it. And we as a leader have to be able to empower it and live it so that when you go, Dave, why did you do that? I don't get it. That artificial harmony is embraced as a thing we shouldn't do. And instead, courage to be clear and candid is what we really let people live, because I don't shoot anybody anymore when they ask me those hard questions.
Um,
Dave, you might be a different kind of boss, and that's part of the thing. Because here's the thing that we going to get to hear from a lot of different people is you don't understand the culture of my organization. It's not like that. That's not. I can't go and just ask a question. And by the way, they're shareholders. We're a public organization, so no one really cares what you feel. They just care how much money they make. And you hear the answers and the yeah buts, as I would call them, about all these things. And if you're really going to get to an answer, like you're using VUCA and about the military, it's like people's lives are at stake. And some of these organizations, people's lives are at stake, healthcare and in medical devices and other things with just a lot of ambulatory care. I just think about that directly, but there's also things outside of that with law and other things. So if we don't have these conversations, we say we care about people. Show me you care about people, right?
Yeah.
Show me and ask the people that you say you care about that if so they felt cared for. Now, we're talking about the ones in the middle of the bell curve, right? Not the outliers that are people are like want everything to be cared for and everybody wins a trophy. We're talking about the people who are like, when you ask me a question, I think that actually giving me a response and not ignoring me would be valuable. How about let's just start there, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to go to where people don't want to go and they want to talk about these larger concepts. What about some of this stuff, guys?
Yeah, I think you both are hitting on it. At the end of the day, as a leader, I think growing and you constantly have to have, at least for me, even at my point in life, emery cloth is good, and I have to learn to be humble, and I have to learn to listen. And I think Dave, you said it earlier, listen different, right? Ask questions differently, And some of the comments that are showing up in the questions on the message board are about, it's not just that first or second question that might be defensive, reactive, but getting a little deeper into what somebody's talking about and giving that grace and space to do that. And it takes practice. I'm a sports person, and what we see on a sport, on TV or on the weekends, on TV, we see the end result of mountains of effort, mountains of practice, mountains of work, self-discipline. And I think that same self-discipline is required of leaders who are going to lead people and guide teams when things are really chaotic and uncertain. You have to create muscle memory. You have to do that, which we as leaders in ourselves have to stumble and fail. We have to be okay with it. We have to look to people left and right to kind of lift each other up. We certainly are better together. I think the three of us are better together. Almost anything that comes our way, we'll tackle it together, and three brains are better than one. And so I think in this space, we have to lean and constantly work on ourselves.
Yeah, I'm helping, as you guys know, I'm helping a charitable group right now, and I sit on their board, but they have me helping down with a subcommittee, right? And some of the board is really stressed because I've so given the group the ability to just run within some objectives, right? And I got an email this week that will surprise, maybe won't surprise you too. But I got an email this week. I actually got 6, where the committee chair of that, where I'm just the board liaison, right? He sent 6 emails reminding me, do we have the CPA firm done where they verified the financials for last year? 6 emails. And so a couple of the board came to me and they go, so you need to tell him to mellow out. And I said, no, I need to continue to embrace his ability to know that I won't do that when he's asking what he thinks is a really important question. I have to ask myself, why did he need to ask 6 times? Because they were really not asking, they were reminders, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really about the uncertainty of, do we have the charitable funds invested properly? Are we keeping an eye on it? I'm not sure you have been. I think you should keep a better eye on it. I think we should keep a better eye on it on the finance committee. And so, to you guys' point, we have to continue to embrace that the questions may tell us why they're doing what they're doing. And it could be uncertainty. It could be it's too complex for them. It could be we communicated, to Wally's point, ambiguously. And at the water cooler, they're going, I don't understand why Dave isn't answering properly or doing this or giving more clarity. So I think it all connects, and being on a volunteer board, right? It just brings it so clear, because I can't make anybody do anything. They're volunteers. They get no money, right? So it's, how do we continue to do that in a business environment that's really a big deal? Make sense?
Dave, this is spot on, right? So here's the thing. If you don't understand why somebody's poking at you 6 times, there is something they've experienced, and we can presume, oh, well, maybe somebody didn't fill out the 990 last time and they actually got a fine and there was problems, right? That's exactly where I go, right? But I was like, how about if I'm wrong? How about if it's something else? And when I work with clients, they come up, because remember, when you deal with leaders, they're like, this isn't my first rodeo. I'm not 20 years old. I've been through a lot of things. I think I know what it is. And I was like, are you 100% certain? And they're like, well, not 100%. I said, why don't you just ask? Then you can be. And that's the funny thing, is that if you ask and say, hey, listen, I noticed that you asked me so many times about this. Could you tell me what's going on? And he'll be like, oh, by the way, I got this going on, but I'm going on this trip and my wife's pregnant and I got these other things and I'm really worried that somebody's not going to be able to handle it. And the last guy didn't. And you're like, okay, I thought some of that, but I didn't know these other parts. Like, Dave, that's what leadership is, right? Wally, when you ask people questions, it's really to understand. Now, if you're offended by a question, understand you haven't built enough trust to be able to ask questions yet.
Yep.
So this
That's what I
is
said to the
something,
board.
right? I
Right?
mean, so you see, guys, like this has been solved before. Why are we not helping people go back to the beginning? Because you know what? They've skipped the beginning and they're already over here going, just get the job done. I was like, but isn't this whole thing about people? Well, yeah, to use them as cogs in a wheel to get here is the understood but never said, right?
That's the first thing I said in my email back to the board member. I said, what he's telling us is that he doesn't trust us. What he's telling us is he's expecting lack of transparency, so he's nudging. So it's just critical that we keep it moving in a direction that builds trust, not shuts it down.
Hey
So we got
guys,
some questions. We got some. Go ahead. Wally.
yeah, I was gonna go there, Mark. I mean, I think this is a very interesting question from one of the viewers. It's like, how do you work with difficult people who are not in your chain of command? And do you directly address the issue or avoid the drama and just keep calm and carry on? I mean, I guess you could do all those things. Let me comment first, and I want both of you to comment. If they're not directly in your command, obviously there's that peer-to-peer communication. But I think as leaders, again, leading, in my perspective, leading is a lot more about not what you have direct control under your thumb, but how you lead with influence, which starts with how well we listen, how we talk, how much trust we build. And many of the greatest leaders have no direct control, but they have influence. And influence is today maybe a scary word. Sometimes it kind of has two sides to it. I'm not sure whether I like the word influence these days, but that's okay. That's just me. But I do believe that as you emulate and work through trust and lead through trust and show real care and concern about people's ability to understand in ambiguity, understand and be candid and those kinds of things. It may be a peer-to-peer to this one person's question that you need to talk to that person's direct, supervisor. You may, depending on the organization's culture, you may talk directly to them because it's different in the size and scale of the company. But I also think the individuals, while they may not say it, they want to know they're heard. They want to know that I've asked a question, back to Mark's point. So there's a couple of ways to answer that. But I do like, at least for me, going well beyond anything I directly control. I want to be approachable, my door be open. I want to build trust and transparency, because when I do need to ask that question that's outside of my direct control, people will work with me. They will help me find a solution. They'll help me work through that situation. Mark.
Dave, I'm going to tee you up, but
Okay.
I want to just interject for a second. Here, let's spin it on its head. Now I know Joy, and who asked the question, but let's say what defines a difficult person, or is it a difficult question, or because some people might say I'm difficult because I'm verbose and because I'm an external processor and I talk too much and I'll ask that additional question. And then somebody else might say that person that's in finance that always goes, well, how are we going to pay for that is difficult. And so there's an assessment that I fell in love with. It helps us understand people that are in diagonal quadrants from us that we may think are difficult. Now, I'm not saying there's not difficult people out there. There are people that are difficult, but
Nope.
we have to define difficult, because guess what? We get to sometimes get a team that we inherit, and sometimes we have ones that we create. And guess what? We can have difficult people no matter how it's postulated. If it's our team or the team so we always have to deal with difficult people. Have you ever been in a relationship with anybody? There's sometimes difficult people we actually spend our lives with or not. So it's a thing, and there's still a fundamental is listening to what they're trying to get across.
Yep.
Why are they stuck on this thing that makes them quote unquote difficult? Is this a belief? I always say, is it a thing, your thing? Is it an us thing, or is it an everybody thing? Meaning, is it just you and them have a difficulty, or is it a group of people, or is it just this person's difficult to every human? And understanding that helps me answer the question. Dave, solve it for us.
Yeah, no, you tap right into what I always use the predictive index for and help organizations use the predictive index for, right? Which is separating difficult from different than me. And
Yeah.
different than me creates an opportunity as I think through it to be able to go, here's how I work better with a person by understanding them, by knowing how to meet their needs. I'm married to, for almost 40 years, a complete opposite accountant and salesperson turned into business builder, right? So, two polar opposites. But in a business, we have to understand that when the VP of finance goes, how the heck are we going to pay for this? The answer should be, I knew you were going to ask that, and I've prepared a really preliminary, not as great as you'll do, spreadsheet that shows how we create ROI, when we get cash flow positive, when we do this, because I have to speak their language because I don't think I have a choice. Now, the difference, and you brought it out, Mark, is difficult is different, right? I'm a person who likes to confront difficult, right? My favorite question, and I don't know if this will help Joy or not, right? But my favorite question is, I go, so help me understand how I should process that. How do you want me to respond when you do X, Y, or Z? I'm open, but I don't know how to respond when you do and name the bad behavior, right? And we ought to be able to talk to people about that without making it a battle, without making it personal. Business isn't personal, right? It's I don't have to make this. I don't like your haircut, and therefore I'm going to talk crappy to you. When mine and Wally's case, they never say that about our haircut.
There is no.
I have to be able to separate that. And I think in today's environment, especially in our virtual environments, okay, it's even more important that I have to be able to break through the idea. And by the way, Wally and I have worked together for more than 15 years. We met more than 15 years ago in our work, right? I'm this human behavior guy trying to help teams in his organization. And we connected. But if you looked at how different Wally and I are, it's actually what I like about him is that I can say, what do you think of this, Wally? And he's going to process it so differently than me. But I think we have to learn to embrace our differences as opposed to be annoyed by somebody on the team that is just different. And it takes some digging in and it takes some hard work. So we have another question from somebody.
Yeah, we do have another question. And guess what, Dave, you and I have never met in person, right? And we have built a relationship digitally just through business to be able to do that. And, I think people wouldn't know that we didn't meet because we try to bridge the gap by communication. So Jade has a question about when your uncertain times just keep extending and getting even more uncertain and rocky, how do you keep the message fresh yet consistent and still keep authentic?
Well, my answer would be you have to start with. I'm sorry, Wally.
Go ahead, Dave.
I think you have to start fundamentally with some transparency. I talk to people about my own struggle with it. I'm forthright with my team about here's what I'm doing, right? I happen to have started about 9 years ago a meditation practice. Nobody who knew me well or knows me well now would have expected Dave O'Brien to be a guy who meditates for 20 minutes every morning, right? But I talk to teams about the things that help me be resilient. I talk to teams about, look, nobody gets to borrow, steal, or own my joy in life. My joy in life is separate from the uncertainties and the other things. And so I communicate with them with authenticity and honesty. And I tell them to search, to exercise, to read, and be willing to embrace tools that they find or hear from others that help with the resilience necessary. And we have a generation coming into the workforce that is needing and looking to us to help them understand what resilience is about, because mom and dad aren't there to help anymore. Wally?
Sometimes mom and dad were actually causing problems of people not being resilient, but that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's another one.
Wally, go ahead.
That's a completely different podcast. I'll add a slightly kind of just a different angle of response to Jade's question, because at least in most of the places we see today, certainly I'm in the Nashville market, and there's a number of organizations here that are going through uncertain times, some automotive, some in the medical community, some in a number of other verticals. And the uncertain times do continue to go on. And in the leadership side of things, the transparency, trying to help make sure that the team and the team members are aligned and they understand and the door is open and they can ask questions. Leaders still have to parse out information in a digestible way along the journey, because it's going to change. Because we don't control tariffs, we don't control the stock market, we don't control what's happening around the world. I'm just very thankful the sun comes up every day. So it's like, okay, lean into that joy, kind of to Dave's point. But I do think as leaders, we have to try to keep things fresh and authentic. We have to think about, if I dump everything as a dump truck that I know the day that the things blow up, most of our staffs will struggle to just absorb all that, because they'll just go into a panic mode. And that's not what we want. We want them to take action. We want them to be confident in all these uncertain times. So you do have to get comfortable, and it does take trial and error of, how do I feed that communication? How do I work through that, which includes both outward communication and receiving it back, to our earlier dialogue of asking deeper questions to know where they're at, what can they absorb. That will help keep things fresh in the messaging of, man, is this ever going to change? I think everybody on this call would go, man, I would love interest rates to go down. Drives me crazy, but they're not down, and I don't control that. I have to work with it, and I can choose how I work with it, right? I get up every day and I can choose how I work with it. And so I think I would just encourage folks to think about how you pulse and feel how the team's receiving information in certain times within your group or whatever you're trying to work on, and how can you transparently share out in digestible amounts to keep things fresh and understanding. Because again, you can't eat the elephant while it's running. You got to do it a bite at a time.
What I'm hearing about that question too is about hearing what other people hear from what you say.
Yes.
Right? So think about it this way. The one thing about change is it's always constant. There's always going to be change. Now, uncertain times, kind of keyword that we're using, there is never certain times. It's just waiting for the next uncertainty. And we can certainly know there will always be something coming up. If it wasn't tariffs, if it wasn't war, if it wasn't the change, if it wasn't something in the stock market, if it wasn't executives leaving an organization or mergers, there's always something. Here's the way to look at it. I consider it opportunity. Now, I'm from New Jersey originally. So trust me, I am not blowing sunshine here saying everything's great. What I'm saying is that some people that have been in an organization that have needed to leave get exited, and actually it changed their life so much better because of it. But in the moment, they're unhappy because they're like, you don't understand. I have all these responsibilities and I have these buts that okay. And then you watch them 6 months later and they're flourishing. And sometimes the messaging is difficult things are going to happen. And if we're resilient enough to not be stuck and we evolve as leaders, as people, to go and say, what's next? What does succession plan for my life look like? Even when you take a role and hey, even what you guys were doing, right? It's not the same as what you were doing a few years ago. And it probably won't be the same as what you're doing a few years from now. So when you think about this, why are we not creating our own uncertain times by looking how we're going to reinvent ourselves, change, evolve, use tools, actually collaborate? The three of us never worked together a few months ago, but now we are. I think everybody has that same opportunity, even if you're a W-2 employee for the longest time. And if that's the message and you truly mean it, and there's radical candor behind it, helping people understand that this change, whatever it is, isn't me just telling you to believe it. It's actually like, here's examples of what has happened because people have embraced change, have learned new skills, have went and done different things, or when things are scary, how they address them. That to me is something that makes you resilient in every part of your life, not just work.
Yeah, no, you're right on target. And Wally, I'm going to leave this to you. We're running tight on time with what we promised this group. We were going to talk a little bit about building some accountability, but we've been talking about things that mattered to the audience, which is great. But it also feeds into the leave behind we're going to send them today, which is that resilience check-in guide, right? Because I think that's what some of the end of this is really circling around, which is how do we help teams build that resilience? Should we finish around that topic, Wally?
I think
Or
so.
Mark?
I would say yes, and
Yeah.
Mark's going to want to jump in as well. But running toward the fire, and using this check sheet that we'll send out, and we have other tools. I think it's interesting without getting into the weeds of the tool. But one of the things I heard recently, when things surface, whether there's two of you, three of you, a team of you, sometimes we sit around the table, and this is not always easy to do. But I'm finding at this point in life, it's better to sit on the same side of the table with the people and put the issue on the table, and we work on it together. It's
Yeah.
a little different, right? And that helps us run toward that because we all bring different capabilities there. And so helping to define what the issue is, the fire we're running to, or the problem we're trying to resolve, and then working through the measurement and accountability, because we all have things we need to add to it. All three of us have vastly different capabilities. Again, for those on the video, we consider ourselves better together. That's kind of our phrase of how we work together as a group of three. And to Dave's earlier point, we're really different, but we lean into the strengths, and we lean even into the weaknesses that each other has on whatever's on the table that we're working on. And I think working in that direction and thinking that through of how does that work if I've just got a financial problem, or I've got an organizational restructure, or we're trying to make a decision of should we move our business to a different location. All those things are solvable, but it's the approach. It's, do we listen? What tools do we use? How do we bring it to the table? And how do we vet it out? And then there is the measurement and accountability. Again, I've never been one. I'm not a big person who likes to use a stick. For those on the call that know me, that's not me. I want to encourage and develop, and I'm okay if we fail forward. I'll hold myself accountable, hold them accountable, because all of us, I think, on this call, I'm sure, have worked at some point in our life for somebody who is like, a stick is the only thing they know. That is just not the way to do things. I'm not saying that you don't have difficult accountability. You don't have difficult disciplined steps you have to take, because you do. It's how you do it. It's how you do it. It's the methodology and the way you approach it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, guys, I really love the part about a worksheet, because, some people come in and it's just some part of this. We want to make sure this is actually actionable. And Dave, thanks for creating the Run Toward the Fire Resilience Check-in Guide, which there's going to be a link in LinkedIn and all the other socials that we have this out, so you can download it and be able to go through it. Not trying to sell anything, as much as we are so passionate about this, that we want to make sure people can actually do it, because hearing about something's different than acting on something. And one of the things all three of us are really passionate about is like, don't just listen to it. What are you going to do because of it? Either this resolved in you to be like, this is something that I think I see at work, or I am actually part of this, or I'd love to change this. Well, let's help you be part of that by answering some of these questions for yourself and working on it. And also, July 23rd, we're going to have trust as the new ROI, winning buy-in when everyone's guard is up. Because if you don't have trust, you're really not going to get anywhere. And you might think you have trust, but let somebody like one of us ask some of your people if they answered honestly. Do they really trust their leaders? And you'll be surprised about the answer.
Yeah, they will be surprised.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. It was really important. And look, I'll end on the same thing about resilience, and I really want you to be able to use it. And the reason I'm writing the book, and the reason I created the checklist, is because I think it's not something that every leader likes to admit, but being resilient and maintaining the ability to break through that artificial harmony and run toward the fire, it's hard sometimes. For some people listening, it's hard all the time.
Yeah.
And if we can give some tools that help you realize that avoiding the run toward the fire keeps you stuck in VUCA, and facing the fire actually transforms and helps you grow. And we'll continue to pour into you with ideas on how to transform and grow, as Mark said, when we talk more about trust, the new ROI. So thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody next time.
I think you guys need to buy a hat before we invite everybody back.
Okay, I think we